This is All About Home Construction. And here's your hosts, Terry Cannell Beck and Randy Blake.
That's right. Good morning, Randy.
Morning, Terry.
Happy Saturday, buddy.
Happy Saturday to you and everybody out there.
That's right. Thanks for listening to us All About Home Construction here on WATA. Lovely Saturday morning, and we appreciate all of our listeners out there. And how was how was the steak dinner last week?
Well, rated as truly as a success.
Nice.
That's the hardest dinner I've ever done.
Yeah?
Took 20 minutes to cook a medium rare ribeye. That's how thick it was.
So my well done is still on the grill.
Yeah, actually, after an hour, I throwed it down to the crows.
That's fair. But no, that's awesome. So yeah, I had a good time. Good turnout.
I had one lady, because I was coming out. I always come out every chance I get to talk to everybody.
Yep.
And she said, "Do you have my order?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." I said, "You ordered it medium," because that was the only ticket I had.
Okay.
And I said, "It takes 20 minutes to cook a medium rare." So after about 5 minutes after the plate went out, I went out and talked to him, and she said, "Yes, sir, thank you."
That's awesome.
You know, that's what makes me happy about what I do.
Well, good. I'm glad it was a good turnout. Glad to help the VFW out. That's awesome.
And then the Sunday, you see my picture on Facebook.
Yes.
Well, that's all we got was French fries, because we didn't have any rolls left.
Wow.
And no potatoes.
That's awesome.
And everything, all my inventory I had left over has all been sold, because people came the next day.
Sweet.
Can we just buy a steak off of it, Randy?
That's awesome. Well, good. I'm glad it was a
truly
success.
the biggest steak in Boone.
Nice. That's awesome. So, have you even started planning the next dinner for the VFW?
No, not yet.
Okay. We'll ask you next time.
Now we are. Chuck's wanting to do another pig picking.
Okay.
So
now, that was good last time he did that.
So we're thinking about, October.
Yep.
That way I have a break. That's hay season.
Right.
But, yeah, we're going to have another steak dinner
okay.
this next coming month.
Nice. Wait. No, I like the pig. When he had that pig before, I think I was one of the first people around. Like the first one through that day when he had that.
I actually donated that.
Yep.
I
remember that.
That was Spot's sister.
Yeah, I remember that. That was good. And so yes, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Of course, we don't have to wait for food that long, because you got the breakfast coming up pretty soon.
Yep, we will be cooking breakfast on Labor Day weekend.
Nice.
So anybody wants to come out and eat, $12.
Sweet, that's good. Well, there you go. So good stuff. Well, I'm glad it turned out well, and yeah, glad it was good.
Thanks
good
everybody
event.
for coming out.
That's awesome.
We appreciate it.
Sweet. Well, give us a call, 828-262-1567. We'd like to get you right on the air. So, what's been happening with the world of construction?
Well, this was my week for my state code class.
Okay.
And 8 hours yesterday.
Oof.
So, but you know
what?
what?
I mean, it's good. It's just 8 hours of sitting still. I get it. It's rough, but.
Well, it is, but it was probably the best code class I had.
Sweet.
And
does that indicate there's been a lot of changes, or just? I mean, I know there's always changes.
Well, yes, they have. They've made some big changes in the laws, and I told Terry, I said, I got to go back and read this again, because it goes against the grain of everything we've been taught for the last 30 years.
Right.
But it's allowing people to start doing non-structural home improvements under $20,000 without a permit.
Is that good or bad?
I think there's just a lot of gray area in it. So that's the reason I want to read it a little bit more.
That's fair.
Before I bring it to the radio show.
That's fair.
They did have a new law out there. This is for designers, and or for homeowners wanting to find a designer. You're limited now to a $300,000 price tag or a 3,000 square foot.
Okay.
On a house. Designers cannot cross those thresholds.
Right.
And after that, it has to be stamped by an architect. So,
and I would imagine, and this is just me completely just guessing here, I would imagine, though, that's cutting down on a lot of these, like, I bought plans off of internet kind of deals.
Well, no, you can actually buy a set of plans off the internet, and they'll be stamped by the architectural company that does them that you buy.
Gotcha.
But they're generic.
Well, and that's what I'm thinking is like, I mean, we live here in the mountains, so the house that I buy, the plan, if I go on and buy a plan for, Texas, and it's not going to work here in the mountains.
Well, it's not designed for the wind load,
right? And I guess that's what I was curious if that helps cut down on some of that, because at least then they have to be a real architect, not a designer, or not somebody just playing around with the computer program.
Yeah. Well, I have a friend of mine that does a lot of drawing for me. Then we have Patrick Bevel, that
Sure.
the engineer that draws, and which we've used him quite a few times over the years.
Yep.
We actually did one project, Appalachian architect Drew from Mass Store, but they hired him. And architects are a little more expensive, but that CAD system that they have is unreal.
Right.
And now you can't buy it. Now you have to lease it for a year, and I don't know what the cost of that is.
Does an architect get how much? I guess what's the crossover between architect and engineer? Like, at what point do they not do the same thing?
They generally are supposed to be pretty close.
Okay.
Because an architect can design your house and do the engineering on your beams and stuff like that. Okay. Where a designer would draw it, and if you have specialty beams, he'd take it to an engineer and have an engineer stamp.
Okay.
And with Icon, it's just a one-stop shop.
Right.
They got their design team, and then they're Patrick Bevel does the stamping. So
that makes sense. Cool.
But what that does, it takes a lot of guesswork out for a contractor. Which let's say we buy floor trusses and LVLs from New River Building Supply. Okay.
Right.
Now, all the engineering is done on the floor trusses, and everything is done on the LVLs by their truss company. See, so.
But that's okay. But I guess with the truss, that's coming in, so it's even though you just put it in the house, as long as you install it correctly, the engineering part is okay.
That's right. Matter of fact, you have to.
That makes sense.
When you do your building permit, you have to have that truss plan hanging on the wall with the stamp on it.
Okay. Well, cool. So. Well, that's really interesting, and it's codes are very interesting in themselves, especially when you deal with North Carolina, because I think North Carolina, overall, like when we deal with some of the other states, like I think we have good codes, right? I mean,
we probably
protects,
have some. We probably have some of the best codes, but sometimes the best codes isn't the cheapest way to build a house.
Well, and that's that's that crossover. At what point do you codes are great, and don't get me wrong, but they cost money. And I guess when we talk about affordable housing and getting in an affordable house, that's any code is going to change the cost of it for sure.
Well, we can't build a house affordable.
Right.
And the reason for that is because of the codes.
Yep.
And do we necessarily want to build an affordable house that's going to fall down?
Well, and then that's the devil's advocate, right?
And we discussed that yesterday. That house that fell down in Raleigh, a couple years ago around Christmas time, it just fell over.
Yeah.
And the point of it was it wasn't nailed correctly.
Okay.
But it passed inspection. And then it just disappeared. I didn't know what happened to it after it passed inspection because they never did have it on the news anymore.
Hush, hush, right.
Yep. But,
Well, we saw that in Boone, 8-10 years ago when some of the buildings were, some of the apartment buildings were built. Remember, they were falling down the mountain. Before they in the early stages of the construction, but still.
Well, they put the 45 degree rule is the depth of your footer on a steep bank, okay? And then they took it back out. Then they put it back in. All right. And what that means is the back footer has to be down in the dirt far enough till it can't push out the front footer.
Right.
And
so whatever, which could be a lot if you're on the side of a mountain.
Correct.
I mean,
that's right.
You could be 20 feet deep.
We built one house at the lowest corner of the house was 18 block high. The upper corner was only 2 block out of the ground.
Yeah.
And it was because of rock. We had to build all around the rock and pin it and stuff like that.
And that goes back. I mean, this is a whole nother conversation, but that to me, on new construction, you might as well just build a basement.
Well, sometimes you can't. You know, if you like that house we did, if you start and that big rock was in the middle of it.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I get that, but per dollar per square foot, you can't build anything cheaper than a basement.
Correct.
I mean,
that's right.
Assuming you're building a house, you can't build anything cheaper than a basement.
So,
and everybody always puts in storage buildings or garages or something.
Well, that's the reason.
So even if you don't want to finish it, you got that.
You know, we was talking about tract builders. You know, that can build, 5,000 homes a year, and well, you can't build 5,000 homes a year up here.
No, you don't have a flat place.
Yeah, I had guys tell me yesterday they're building 10 houses a year up here.
Which, say that driving downtown, there's quite a few going up pretty fast.
And but it's all due to the ground. And it's like we discussed before, our forefathers had enough insight to build the houses on the best part of their property.
All the good stuff's already gone, for sure. So that's, I mean, all the flat land is gone. You don't find very much flat land in Boone anymore, or in Watauga County, or
Correct.
Really any of the three counties around. There's not very much flat. You got to get down to Wilkesboro before you can get some flat, and even then,
Caldwell County.
yeah, so even
get
then,
some rolling hills.
The best of it's gone. We'll take our first break. We'll come right back right after this. Get into the main topic. Thanks for listening to us. Obviously, by listening to this podcast, you see the value of All About Home Construction. Well, by joining our listener supporter community, you're not just tuning in, you're standing with us as we are able to support and fuel our passions of the construction industry. As a listener supporter, you'll enjoy exclusive perks, including hearing your name, or maybe even your business name, on our show. So please go to our Spotify website. The link will be in the show notes, and join. You can join for as little as $1 one-time fee, $1 a month, $5 a month, whatever you think you can afford. Every single penny helps to keep this show going as we can continue to grow and do lots more things. Thanks a lot. And again, more importantly, thank you for listening to this. That's right, All About Home Construction here on WATA. And again, to thanks to all of our listeners, give us a call, 828-262-1567. So, Randy, we talked last week about log houses and cabins, and honestly, we didn't get through what we wanted to get through.
No, we didn't.
I mean, we talked so much about it, more of the history about it, but we didn't even get to the different types of cabins and logs and choices. So we figured, hey, why not? Let's stay on the log cabin train.
Yeah. Well,
Log
yeah,
cabin.
there's so many different types of log cabins. And, we got into the history of it, and but we didn't talk about how the evolution of a log cabin is. And they are changing. They're still changing today. Mm-hmm. And so let's get into it.
That's pretty cool, yeah. So, okay, just to recap a little bit, when the house and cabin, essentially we're talking about size. So today, it's interchangeable, I guess, in modern terms. It depends on how you kind of look at it, but basically, log house, log cabin's pretty much the same.
Yep.
In modern terminology.
It just depends on what you want to look at.
Right.
The different styles, square logs or
and so that's it. So when we start talking about types of logs, you really see a lot. Now that traditional Appalachian, I guess you'd say, you got the square logs, and you see a lot of that. Especially I'm thinking like going back in traditional logs, you got the square rectangular logs. A lot of times was hand hewed.
Yep.
With the axe, and but so when you're driving down the road, the houses that you see, these square log houses, that's. Would you say that's the most common? I think it is. I mean, I would
in our area,
iconic, I guess you would say.
Well, we have sawmills that cut square logs.
Right.
There's actually a sawmill at Tennessee state line that makes round logs. Mm-hmm. All right, but they have to have specific logs, size log to do it. And
well, I guess that's the advantage of the square logs is everything. It's just like the advantage of standard lumber, standard dimension lumber, right? I mean, the reason we have standard dimension lumber is so that you can go anywhere and build it. Right, standard, yeah. And I guess the square logs was kind of leaning towards that in that, even if they were done one log at a time, they were, you're able to get the same height, the same width on those logs, and which is really where that hand-hewed look comes from. We think of it today as looking neat and given it that aesthetic charm, but really the purpose of the hand-hewed logs was to get the width the same.
That's right.
The thicknesses.
And ease. When you take a round log, you're always thicker on one side, thinner on the other.
Yep.
So one side you got a thick log on, you have to reverse it on the other side,
right.
And that gives you standard height.
Yeah.
And when you get to the top, you got to either put a board on it, shim it, or take an axe, cut the top off so it's all the same level.
Right. And you can still get hand-hewed logs today, and I mean they're not cut. Well, I mean, they probably could be, but typically they're not cut by hand. They're sawed out, like you said, in a regular sawmill, but you can go back through, and, I mean, there's probably a machine, but I know, have you ever seen the hewing axe?
Yes.
Those are pretty cool. It's like a bent.
I've actually had a friend of mine. He hewed all his logs by himself.
That's awesome. I mean, for those that's never seen a hewing axe, it looks like an axe, almost like a hatchet. It's a little bit smaller than a regular splitting axe, but bigger than a hatchet. I don't know.
Well, you also got it's more like a big hoe.
Yeah.
To cut the chips out.
Well, that's what I was going to say. There's two different ones, right? One of them is like a regular axe that you just bend. But I mean, there's more to it, but it's bent, slide, kind of cut, turns out to the side. And then there's the ones like you said, where it's like a hoe.
That's
almost.
what John used. He used that type of tool. I can't think of the name off because
I've always called them hewing axes. I don't know if they got a better name.
But they used to use them like on a lot of round logs, where a lot of times it's faster to hew a log down than it was to take a broad axe
and split.
Yep. My dad used to talk about his grandfather. He didn't ever use a stone to sharpen any of his tools that he made. He was a blacksmith. Mm-hmm. He'd sharpen them with fire by drawing the edges out.
I don't know how people do that, but yeah, I've heard of it being done. But I've always thought that was a very interesting, almost science to it.
And if you go to State Fair, it's been a long time since I've been. So surely they still do this, but they always had the forgers down there.
Oh, yeah.
Forging stuff. And I got to watch a guy take a piece of plate steel, make planer blades out of it, and hammer it out and sharpen it there. Now, he did use a file to sharpen it, but he could cut a piece of paper with it.
Isn't that cool?
Just like a razor blade.
Blacksmithing, doing those forges, that's a hobby that I've always been interested in, way before the TV shows even. Everybody watches the TV show now on Forged in Fire or whatever, but I've been a fan of it way before then. In fact, before that show, I almost bought a hand cranked forge one time.
I missed the forge one time because I didn't have a way to haul it back.
Well, I just decided not to buy it and then kicked myself ever since because it was like $50.
Oh, wow.
It was cheap. It wasn't seized up. The blower wasn't seized.
Yeah, you could have fixed that.
But it was perfect. It was in good shape. It was in working order. But the coolest, we're completely going down a rabbit hole. The coolest forge I've ever seen, though, was a homemade, a guy was a farrier. It was a farrier's forge. And it was like on a set, almost like a tripod. It was a little set. So I had the firebox pan, whatever you want to call it, with a blower. But it also had an anvil attached to it. It was like two guys. It was a small anvil, but two guys could pick it up, move it, and put it in a truck. Mm-hmm. But the whole setup, it was like a portable forge. It was really anyway. Completely. All right, getting back to logs.
All right, let's go back.
So, would you say that square? Let me save this question for later. So we got square logs. You had mentioned round logs. What's the advantages of the round logs, other than looks?
Well, I think if we go back through history and look at it, it was easier to build because all they had to do was cut a tree down, and they most round log cabin. My dot matrix screwed up this morning.
Yeah, it's
most round log cabins, you have saddle notches in them that they could cut out with an axe.
Right.
All right, and they can fit it. And see, the saddle notch was your lock.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so your logs locked together. We all grew up with Lincoln logs. Remember the little saddles, even though they were square logs.
Yeah.
And so there's your structural part of it, holding it together.
Well, so what's the difference? So another type or the profile is the Swedish cope, which is what's the difference between the round and the Swedish cope?
Well, the Swedish cope now is labor intensive, okay? Because if you look at the picture there, and if we could blow that picture up, you could see where they take a chisels or they take draw knives and they contour the log with it. Now the whole log has a saddle in it, okay?
Right.
So the next log fits on it. The log, as it settles down, it fits tight, and there's no need to have any insulation put in it.
Okay, so basically the logs are connected to are touching each other.
Correct.
Whereas on a typical round log, and even with the square logs, you got in between. You get that filler space, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But you got that.
Most of the Swedish don't. My brother built one out in Idaho, or actually in Spokane, Washington, that we got to go look at. And some of the logs on it was nearly 3 foot across.
Wow.
Well, they were turn logs, okay? And they already had the saddles already cut in them for them. And then they had the concave where the next log set down in it.
Yep.
And
I guess anymore, though, like you said, they're turned. Like they put them on lathes. So now in modern building code or practices, those logs are all the same thickness.
Not necessarily. And that's the thing about it is, but the log cabin is built from the factory before it comes to the job, and all the logs are labeled.
So then it's like put them together.
Yeah. So what they were able to do is in that saddle they put some fiberglass insulation in it, and they didn't count on the R value; they counted on the U value of the logs.
Right. So the insulation in this case was just a stopgap.
Yeah,
keeping the air blowing through, not necessarily to insulate.
And they took a grease gun and used it for the chinking, the synthetic chinking, and they put a spread end on it that they manufacture, and they take a spoon and they spoon that chinking in.
Okay.
So it was a real small, not more than.
Yeah. Well, and I want to. Yeah, I definitely got some questions about chinking here in just a minute. But the last main style, I guess you'd say, or profile is the D logs. Which is kind of the advantage of both. Like you get that round look, but you got the ease of, if you will, of putting it together of the construction side of being flat and square.
Well, there's evolution in the D logs, okay? Because there's D log cabins out there that have round outsides, but they have total flat top and bottom. And so a lot of times when those cabins come out, you had to cut your own notches to fit into them, a lot of them.
Okay. So I didn't realize that. I thought most of them come with
But there was no R value in it because there was no grooves in them. A lot of guys build them, but they didn't put in butyl tape or the backer rod,
right,
or some type of foam. Because I remember Costa Rustica down here, that's the type of log they are.
Yep.
All right, but when they went to refinish the siding on it, they pressure washed it. They was blowing water on the inside of the restaurant.
No.
And so they had to change their method. And then the D log came out with the grooves and everything to make it more energy efficient.
Okay. So that's pretty much our four. I'm going to say 4 different profiles, right? Square, round, Swedish, and D. And it's in terms of looks and profile. But you mentioned something kind of interesting there, and that was chinking. So chinking essentially is when you lay a log and you stack another log on top, and unless you cut the notch right to set it down, you're going to have a space in between that.
Correct.
And that's what you're filling in with chinking.
Well, D-log eliminates chinking, okay? Then you have logs that have splines, where there is an intentional gap, where you put a 2x6 in the upper spline, the new log fits on top, and then you would screw everything together. It used to be lag bolts.
Yep.
All right. And then we went to ollie screws, which ollie screws were great.
Right.
Because you could take an 18-inch ollie screw and go right through the log, right through the spline, and into the next log. So
you're locking them all.
You're locking them all the way through the whole house to keep them from moving. But then, we get the R value of wood is only 1, so your R value of your spline is only 1.5 R value.
Yeah. Well, when you put the chinking in, right? I mean, most when we go back to the square logs, especially, and even the round logs, most chinking's what, 3-4 inches?
No, actually, it's not, because you've got to fill in that spline, and what we used was 1/2-inch blue board.
Okay.
And we put it inside and outside. On the inside, we made it thicker than we did the outside, so we had 1.5 inches there. Mm-hmm. So what we did was we put 2 pieces of blue board on the outside, we put 3 on the inside, and then we shot our wire lath on. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then we used mortar.
Yeah.
But I used the National Historic Registry recipe.
Okay.
For that, and that's the house we're working on right now that we CO'd in 2000, and the mortar's still just as good looking now as it was when we left.
That's what I always wondered. Like, I mean, traditionally, like, again, going back traditionally, it's mud, right? You fill it in with dirt and mud.
Correct.
And
hog hair.
And hog hair, or some kind of, to kind of give it that, just like you put fiber in concrete today,
That's right?
Just to give it some holding value of its, where it holds on, locks into itself. So, again, we've evolved from that technology-wise. I've always wondered, though, that chinking is, because I've seen different ones. I've seen the hard, essentially mortar.
And it's in synthetic.
Synthetic, and that's the rubbery. Squirts out of a gun, almost like a squirt gun kind of thing.
Correct. And then you have to spread it.
Yeah.
I've never done it, and I've looked at a lot of homes over the years that, these fast builders come in, get out, use it, and 5 years later you got to go back and redo them again.
Right.
And you don't want a home that you have to redo every 5 years on your chinking.
Right. Well, I know chinking, you got maintenance, and you got the expense of the insulation into the chinking and the actual chinking itself, right? Cost-wise, is there an advantage to having a log house that's chinked versus one that, where the logs lock into itself?
It's, I guess, what you want is the look.
It's more about
more about what you want to see as a client.
Well, I would say, though, that at least there's probably electricians like the chinking a lot better.
Yeah.
I mean, it just makes sense. It's a little bit easier.
But if you think about an electrician doing it right, your receptacle's 14 inches off the floor, so
it wouldn't fall.
So he has to come in from underneath. See,
so it may not necessarily fall into the. All right, let's take another break. We'll come right back right after this. Are you looking for a sawmill dealership that can provide you with the quality equipment you need to get the job done? Look no further than Blue Ridge Sawmills. We offer the full line of Hudson sawmills and sawmilling equipment, from portable sawmills to skidding winches. At Blue Ridge Sawmills, we understand that every project is different, which is why we offer a wide range of sawmilling services. We can help you from everything from finding the right mill for your farm, hobby, or even your business. We also offer a variety of sawmilling supplies, such as blades and debarkers, so you can get everything you need in one place. If you're looking for a sawmill dealership that can provide you with the quality equipment and the service you need, then come to Blue Ridge Sawmills. We're here to help you get the job done. Call or visit our Cana, Virginia store at 276-755-3833 or our Asheboro, North Carolina location at 336-964-8304. That's right. All about home construction here on WATA. And again, thanks to all of our listeners out there. Give us a call, 828-262-1567. If you're listening to us on the podcast, well, you can shoot us a message, all about home construction at Gmail, or anybody. I mean, you don't have to be listening to the podcast to email us. You can email us if you're not. If you're listening to the radio, we don't care. We'll take your email both ways.
Yep.
And then, of course,
or
Facebook. Call in. Yeah. So, we appreciate all of our listeners out there. So, it's good stuff. That's why we do it. We do it for you guys. So thank you. And share it with a friend, right? Tell a friend to go listen all about home construction. Do it right now. Pause. Do it. Whatever you're doing, drop it. Go tell a friend to listen to us. Okay, you can do it after the show. Well, so we talked about the little different types of logs, and what about the corners? So you've sort of touched on this already, but really when we start talking about the corners, this is one of the things for me anyway, like you don't really think about because you see log houses all the time.
Yep.
But when you start to look at them, there's a lot of different types and different ways to stack these logs and where the corners are locking them in together. But essentially, all log houses, and we can talk about hybrids, but all log houses itself, there's, they lock in. I mean, that's the advantage of the log, right? Like that's why they started being built in the first place. Is lock in. There's no extra framing. There's no extra stuff.
Well, that's a support on how to make them, I guess, as energy efficient as you can.
Yep.
And we talked about the D-log, and in one of the pictures, there's that log cabin right there. As the log comes in, they have a machine that goes ahead and puts that recess in about 1.5 inches for you. So when you put your logs together, you can put your insulation in, which could be
and that's what that little groove at the top and bottom is.
Correct. That's for your foam.
Yep. Now, all right, so corner styles, you got a couple different types. You got the interlocking corners, you got saddle notch corners, you got the button pass corners, you got dovetail, and you got corner post. Corner post is one I don't think, personally, I don't see that one as much. That's the vertical, where like, I mean, it's what it sounds like, a vertical post going up, and you mortise and tendon traditionally and lock those logs into place.
Correct.
We don't really see a lot of that around here, do we?
No, we don't. But they are here. But they're button pass logs, but they got corners on them. Mm-hmm. So you don't.
Fake corners. So almost.
So what they do is they take that corner post out and they just butt the logs together and offset.
Yeah.
Front first, side second, back and forth, and then they'll put a corner on to cover them up.
Okay.
That's the fastest way to build one.
That makes sense. But would you say interlocking is the probably the most common that we see?
Yeah.
I mean that's essentially you're just cutting a square recess into it, and the opposite square recess on the top log, and they just lock together that way tight.
They are that's a lot of them. Then the others are dovetail. Okay, and the dovetail now, there is a cabin in Watauga County where they put the dovetails upside down. But the dovetail is actually made to shed water off. Okay, so every time it rains, the water drops from the log above.
It falls out.
And then it runs off, see, and that's the way it's made.
That, you know what, you just made me think, because I've always thought the dovetails are backwards because gravity's pushing it out instead of in.
Correct.
But I see what you're saying. It's more for the water going out.
Yep.
Okay.
You know, that's how the old timers go back and look at some of their work in 1900s, late 1900s, early 20th century, and they had to do everything to run water off with nothing.
Right.
You know,
they didn't have modern guttering and stuff.
No, they didn't. And just to watch the going down another rabbit hole was the old standing seam roofs that you see on these old houses from the early 20th century. There was no glue.
Yep.
Okay. And the only thing they might have had was tar, all right, for the lap. A lot of them didn't even have that. And where I got into doing copper standing seam, I actually learned how they put these things together with clips. Okay. But then they did have the blacksmith tools to crimp them.
So now you're crimping them tight,
And,
so it's one piece of
So they actually created a roof where they didn't have to have any material like caulking. And that's what, on metal roofs, I tell people you don't need no more than a couple tubes of metal. If you do your metal right, you don't need hardly any caulking at all.
Right.
So same thing with the logs, see? The way they built the log cabin was to make sure water would run off every joint.
Yep.
So if you look at the one picture of the saddle, see, it's a round cut for a round log, so every time the water runs, it runs off.
Yep.
both sides.
Well, that's it. And so the saddle ones were more that Swedish profile where they were sitting close on top
Correct.
of each other.
And that button pass you was talking about, where we was talking about before about the flat log. Mm-hmm. Now, that's the log design that I really don't like because it doesn't shed water.
See, that's what I was curious. Like, that one doesn't seem, of all the types, to me, that one seems the least
But you can,
strong. I mean, in terms of
no, well, with modern building technologies, you can make it just as strong. 'Cause
okay.
You can take, in that instances right there, rotate from diagonal to diagonal,
Right.
each log above, and never have an ollie screw butt into another one, see?
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
When you get into the D-logs with the cut corners and stuff, you can actually take two ledger locks or ollie screws, and you can level that wall as you go up, because you tighten the inside up, brings the log in,
Yeah.
tighten the outside, pushes the log out. So you can actually make it quite
Boom. I
plumb as
see
you
what you're
come
saying.
up. Because I've been in log cabins where they've stacked them, and there's as much as 1.5 inches difference as the log goes up, see?
Now, that's really the hard part about building the log cabin, right? Is keeping that square, keeping that plumb.
Just, no.
Because if you're not careful, though, does it want to like shift as you build it?
No,
and settle?
not if you put it together
Okay.
right. Okay, and you always start from your corners and work in.
Right.
All right, and not corners, inside out. Mm-hmm. You always dropping the log in,
Right.
and you're trying to fit that log as tight as you can get it.
Now, okay, so while you're talking about dropping logs in and actually the construction of them, what's your thoughts on the doors and windows? Now, how do you do it? Because I've seen it done both ways, where you build the cabin, you build the wall, and then you go back, you cut the windows out.
No,
doors out.
we
but
cut-
most people just do it.
What
on
we
the
do
way.
is we rough them.
Right. That's what I thought.
But you got to make sure that you leave that whatever the manufacturer wants.
Right.
1.5 inches, 2.5 inches above your windows and doors.
Okay.
For your logs to center, you actually make your bucks with a slot in it, so it can settle. And so if you take a skill saw and you use 16 penny nails, and you nail the nail in the middle of the slot, that allows it to go down.
Yeah. Okay.
See.
Okay.
And the hardest part is on a log cabins, your center walls, because as your logs shrink,
Yeah.
the inside wall, your spruce framing don't shrink. So
Yep. Well, and settling's a big deal, though. You're talking about shrinking. Like settling is a huge part, one of the cons, if you will, of a log house.
it is.
It's going to settle. I mean,
They'll come and go their whole life, but eventually they'll settle out. Like Tommy Thomas's. We were fortunate enough that his wife couldn't decide what she wanted to do on the inside of the house, so we got to walk away for 8 months.
yeah.
And let the house settle. Then we could go back in and adjust it.
Yeah.
And we got a good grade of log, and believe it or not, the whole cabin only settled 3/8 of an inch.
Wow, that's not
And
bad.
it should have, as a rule of thumb, each log's going to shrink 1/8 inch.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty good. That's pretty lucky. Like, that's pretty good. Well, okay, so part of that settling question is when you generally, I mean, I know there's probably exceptions out there, but typically when you buy logs today, it's all kiln dry.
No, sir.
It's not.
No, most of them you buy are green.
So they're
now,
green.
Now there is a out Roby Green Road. Now that company, I don't know.
Well, yeah.
They have big kills for their logs.
So it's a little of both.
Yeah. But what you want to do, you either want to build all green or you want to build all
Yeah,
dry.
you don't want to switch it. That makes sense. I heard, and you may have been the one that told me this years ago, where somebody had used somehow a yellow pine log had got mixed in, and so it was
It wasn't yellow pine, but actually oh no, that was on the one we built last year.
Well, I've heard a story before where it was like years ago, and where the one log right somewhere right in the middle was yellow pine or something. It was a different pine, and it bowed out, like as far as the other log underneath it was.
Yep.
Like that's 6 or 8 inches or something.
Well, that was a log that was a flat log and didn't have a spline on it, see, so it allowed it to move.
Yeah,
It wasn't
makes sense.
fastened correctly.
I never saw it. I just heard that story, but man, that's rough. We'll take our last break. We'll come right back right after this. Obviously, by listening to this podcast, you see the value of All About Home Construction. Well, by joining our listener supporter community, you're not just tuning in, you're standing with us as we are able to support and fuel our passions of the construction industry. As a listener supporter, you'll enjoy exclusive perks, including hearing your name, or maybe even your business name, on our show. So please go to our Spotify website. The link will be in the show notes, and join. You can join for as little as $1 one-time fee, $1 a month, $5 a month, whatever you think you can afford. Every single penny helps to keep this show going as we can continue to grow and do lots more things. Thanks a lot. And again, more importantly, thank you for listening to this. That's right. All About Home Construction here on WATA. Again, thanks to all of our listeners out there. So, talking a little bit about log houses.
You know what? We still didn't finish.
We still didn't finish because log houses are so awesome. I mean, they're iconic. They're America's house.
That was the easy way for Americans to build a home.
Okay, quiz. Rabbit hole quiz. You ready?
Yep.
Last president to be born in a log house.
You know, I can't recollect that because we talked about that. And it wasn't Abraham Lincoln.
It was not Abraham Lincoln. James Garfield. 1831 is when he was born. James Garfield.
You know, I don't know if I don't recollect anybody from the 1800s ever meeting him. I know they was probably still around when I was born, but
yeah.
My granddad was born in 1901, so that's pretty close.
Yeah, that's pretty good. He was the 20th president, by the way, James A. Garfield.
Didn't he get shot?
Yep, he did. He got shot. He was assassinated in 1881. He was shot. He's a pretty cool guy, I guess. I mean, he was House of Representative guy, 20th president. I don't know much else about him. I'm trying to think. He was Union military. In fact, okay. Here is a Appalachian tradition or connection to James Garfield. James Garfield would have been within 100 miles of Boone in the Civil War. He came back through.
Really?
He was in that when the Union came through. Okay, maybe not 100 miles, maybe just outside of 100 miles. But he came down through Southwest Virginia. The biggest battle in Southwest Virginia is Cloyd's Mountain, which is in Floyd County, which is like 4 counties over from us. If you go up and over about 4 counties, James A. Garfield was part of that. So there you go. I don't know. That is some random knowledge that I know, and there you go.
Did you learn that from your reenactment?
I just know that from probably. I don't know. I just know things, man. Just know things. And you mentioned Abraham Lincoln living in a log cabin. You can go visit the log cabin that he was born in. But
Actually,
there's quite a bit of controversy.
Yep,
he probably wasn't born in that actual building.
They actually say he was born in Asheville, North Carolina.
Yeah. So the building that they at the birthplace of Abraham Lincoln, it may not be the actual logs that
that we grew up to, the 3-walled log cabin.
There you go. You know, we didn't even talk about the types of logs, like species of wood used. We didn't even talk about. There's a lot we didn't talk about.
And how the industry's moving, actually away from logs,
getting into more synthetics.
Yep,
steel,
and concrete and steel, and which I prefer personally myself.
Well, because you're a metal guy, of course you do.
Yeah, but what I mean, a stick-built home with log siding on it. That way, we got the efficiency of the.
But they just don't look the same, man.
Well, you can buy corners now.
Well, so what? You still see nail holes, and when you get up close, it's just not the same.
Quit your whining. But you know what you can do? You can, if you use those 8-inch log siding, or you use 10-inch or 12-inch, you can turn it right around on the inside, and you can match it back with tongue and groove, so it makes it look.
And then it looks like a log inside.
That's right.
Well, I've seen a cool storage building where they took 1x8s, 1x10s, and they painted. It was a storage building, so they had the regular side on the outside, and they painted it black or gray, whatever it was, and then they went back with 1x, 1x4 or 1x8s or whatever, and left just chinking space in between, and from a distance it looked like a log building. Yeah, I mean, once you got up close, it was obvious it wasn't, but from the road, it looked like a little log.
Yeah, there's
storage building.
there's a house somewhere in Watauga County where they hung 1x12s on the wall, or 1x10s on the wall.
Yeah.
And they put chinking in between. That was pretty nifty.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. It's a way to get the best of both worlds. But to me, if I'm going to build a log house, just give me a log house, man.
I just can't remember where that house is. I'd like to go back to it and see how it held up.
Yeah, well, hey, there's all sorts of designs.
I've seen a lot in the 35 years
Yeah.
I've been in business.
I bet so. Log houses that are not log houses.
That's right.
Anyway, thanks to all of our listeners out there. We really do appreciate everyone out there. Share this with a friend. Go back, listen to the podcast. Tell your smart speaker to play it. We're on YouTube now as well. The podcast part, just the audio, so you can listen to us. There's nothing really to watch, but you can listen, and you can find us on YouTube. So that's the way most people can find us now.
And don't forget my breakfast. First Saturday of every month.
First Saturday.
We appreciate everyone out there that helps us at the business.
That's it. It's gonna be good next weekend. Labor Day weekend. It's the extended weekend too, right?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people will be gone.
Well, but if you're not gone, or if you have friends in town, go get the breakfast.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to us. We'll see you next time. Take it easy, man.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to our podcast all about home construction. Our show airs live on WATA Radio in Boone, North Carolina every Saturday morning. Check out our Facebook page, All About Home Construction. Leave your tips and comments there. Also, subscribe, like, and share this with a friend.